All right, so not sure how this Bluetooth headset is going to work out, um, but I guess we shall see on the viewing of the playback. So, last left off at lesson three. Um, lesson three. Lesson three of joint fundamentals, and it is joint planning, air power, and space power. Didn't really get too deep into joint planning, air power, and space power because we kind of gave an overview from the second exercise in the class, and I had a lot to say about it. Um, the joint planning process for air. And of course, we are waiting for it to load. Let me lock this door. The joint planning process for air, or JAPA. Since the U.S. Space Force was recently established, no space specific planning methodology has been promulgated. For example, a joint planning process for space, or the like. Whether the U.S. Space Force will include something analogous in its doctrine now being produced remains to be seen. The way the Combined Space Operations Center planning processes actually function, though, is similar in many respects to the JAPA. The air power specific JAPA closely follows the steps of JPP, which you examined previously in JP 5-0. A key JAPA output is a document called the Joint Air Operations Plan. The JOP is the baseline strategic plan the JFAC uses to focus the planning team and the operators executing the plan. A table shown a table showing how steps in the JAPA feed specific sections of the JOP is below. JAPA, JFC guidance, JOP paragraph 1, situation guidance. COGS, CVs, enemy COAs. 1, situation enemy forces. Component tasks. 1, situation friendly forces. Mission statement. 2, mission. JFAC's intent. 3, execution intent. COA statement. Concepts of ops. Branches and sequels. Execution of NXC. JFAC objectives, execution objectives, and so on and so forth. It's a lot. I'll just let you read it if you really want to see it. I don't see how it matters. The JOP, together with the Daily Air Operations Directive, helps turn the JFAC's broad guidance into tactical tasks planned and executed in the form of the daily Air Tasking Order, Airspace Control Order, and SPINS, Special Instructions. You may be unfamiliar with most or all of these products. It's so funny because I remember seeing all of these things on a classified thing, but I never looked into it because it was beyond the scope of what I was doing. So I think that may be one of the things everyone that plays a part in the puzzle should kind of know how and the significance of what they're doing. And maybe that produces a better product, maybe it doesn't. But I think um, you need to know the why in your organization because one day we'll fight um, a war where we're fighting near peers or peers, and that's when we're going to need to know the why because when you are neck and neck with your opponent, I think you need to have that buy-in, that mental buy-in. You need to be dialed in. So whatever propaganda, whatever they want to feed you, you kind of need to be full up. You need to be blued. You need to be greened. You need to be all in. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's good to have everybody on the same page. You may be unfamiliar with most or all of these products. The important takeaway is that air power planners and space power planners too, though without a codified procedure to date, I think that is not the case anymore because um, I'm pretty sure they have developed a lot of the doc or some of the doctrine, and so I don't know if this is accurate still. Follow a specific process to turn high-level guidance into a series of nested products that underpin actual air power or space power employment. Joint Air Operations Planning, Joint Force Mission, JFC Estimate, Objectives and Comprehensive AOR, and JOA Perspective, or JOA Perspectives, that's JP, JAPA, JFAC, JFC Staff Estimate of the Situation, JFAC and or JFC Staff Recommended COA, JFC approves COA, Joint Air Operations Plan, Supporting Plan, Area Air Defense Plan, Airspace Control Plan, JFAC's Daily Guidance. I feel like I should have did this before I went absent. I feel like that might have helped me. Um, Maybe you do these PME courses before you go to staff. Maybe that's a good idea, I think, at every level. Supporting plan, JFAC's daily guidance, master air attack plan, and supporting orders, air operations directive, air tasking order, airspace control plan. JOP big picture strategy and execution. Although depicted as a linear process, it is important to remember that the JAPA and JPP often run simultaneously. The teams within the JOC's strategy division or CSPOC strategy and planning division may or may not have complete guidance from the JFC's planning cell. One example of planning in such a vacuum comes from Operation Desert Storm. The air objectives were first derived from a presidential press conference, not official guidance. There is a rhythm to the way the JFAC centrally controls air operations through the JI. It is called the Joint Air Tasking Cycle. The Joint Air Tasking Cycle, or JATC, translates operational guidance into tactical instructions via the ATO. A similar cycle translates space related guidance into the Joint Space Tasking Order. It is important to have a basic understanding of the principles and doctrine for planning, tasking, executing, and assessing joint air or joint space operations throughout the range of military operations. There's a student activity. Click through the activity below to learn more about the joint air tasking cycle. Objectives, effects, and guidance. The JFC consults often with component commanders to assess the results of the joint forces effort and to discuss the strategic direction and future plans. Stage one. Stage two, target development. This is the point in the joint targeting cycle and intelligence process after analysts from other organizations have incorporated all source intelligence reports into a targeting database, where efforts of the joint air tasking cycle relate target development to air tasking and target aim points are selected. And these and other data are submitted to the TET. Don't know what the TET is, but maybe they'll tell us. Stage 3, weaponeering and allocation. During this stage, JOC personnel quantify the expected results of the employment of lethal and non lethal means against prioritized targets to create desired effects. The final prioritized targets are developed and are then provided to the Master Air Attack Plan, or the MAP team. The resulting map is the plan for employment that forms the foundation of the ATO. Stage 4, ATO production and dissemination. ATO production teams or ATO production team constructs, publishes, and disseminates the daily ATO and applicable spins to appropriate forces. ATO production team is responsible for the dissemination of the ATO. And this thing will come out like clockwork every day. So I guess what's happening is the plan is developed and for each day, and then at some point you have to give a report of how that plan went, and then based on that assessment you come up with another your tasking order for the following day. I don't know. Stage 5, Execution planning and force execution. The JFAC directs the execution of air capabilities and forces made available for joint air operations. Inherent in this is the authority to redirect joint air assets. Aircraft or other capabilities and forces made available for joint air operations may be redirected with the approval of the JFAC. Stage 6. Assessment. Assessment is performed by all levels of the joint force. And then you go back to stage 1, which was objectives, effects, and guidance. And you do it all over again. And that's the joint air tasking cycle. Required video. The video below has Lieutenant General Jodis's perspective regarding the roles and functions of the CFAC from the NATO point of view. Using his experiences as the CFAC during Operation Unified Protector, he addresses the elements and importance of the CFAC's relationship with the JFC, allied and coalition partners, planning and processes, chaos fundamentals, and key concerns reference delegation of C2 command and control authority. Oops. While watching it, consider what particular challenges for a CFAC or JFAC can you discern when multinational air forces are in play? How do air power force presentation structures stand up to the task of integrated coalition partners? What roles do leadership and personality play in multinational air operations? Oh, yeah, that's a lot. And this video is on YouTube. It's Lieutenant General, can't say that for some reason, Lieutenant General Jodis's CFAC Perspective 2013. Required materials JP 3-30, Joint Air Operations, read pages 3-1 to 3-16. To learn more, read JP 330, Joint Air Operations, read pages 319 to 327. So wait a minute. Okay, all right. So basically, read the rest of JP 330. $12. All right. Joint Air Power and Space Power. Joint Air Power. Combined Air Operations Center, or CAOC. Al Udeid Air Base Cutter. And there's a picture, and this is open source, but there's like a wide open space, and it looks like there's a multinational force there with a bunch of different flags. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different flags. There's a host of large screen TVs that have different data points. There's super size projectors that have, um, that's funny. That's so weird to me. Okay, this is weird. There's 3 projectors that have um, large maps on them, and I don't know if it's real time or what, but I do notice in the picture that there is a red line across the top, and that red line across the top signifies classification levels, and that red line is above the classification level of this platform. So I'm just like, seems like you shouldn't have that in the picture in there. I mean, it's what is that? I'm trying to see what's the shape of this. It's the shape of a country, or maybe it's the shape of an airspace. I think it's probably, I don't know. I'm not too good on my geography, so I won't even try. Anyway, the complexity of both air power and space power complexity require a central hubs to integrate, synchronize, prioritize, and employ various lines of effort with their associated forces. In the case of air, that hub is primarily the JOC. In the case of space, the hub is the CSPOC. The crucial core mission of command and control often rests on the shoulders of the JOC or CSPOC. In decades past, airmen with basic equipment and skill sets could often conduct C2 of air forces from modest facilities. Today, the centers behind major air power and space power efforts will encompass tens of millions of dollars worth of network, computing, communications, and display equipment. Those are some big TVs. They are manned by scores of air power and space power specialists around the clock and dominated by a multi sensor fed Common Operational Picture or COP. The JOC is the key weapon system for the JFAC, and the CSPOC is the linchpin for the CFSCC. A JFC has the option to, and usually does, appoint a JFAC from the service component with the most air assets and best ability to provide C2 for them. The now well established concept of single airman, regardless of service, exercising centralized control over all joint air forces, has been battle tested and proven effective. In the case of space, there's only one CFSCC available and one CSPOC. The global nature of space operations makes this a workable construct. While joint air power and joint space power have many associated terms and acronyms, the basics are straightforward. This lesson material explains the difference between the COMAFOR and the JFAC, as well as the Space Operations Center, or correction, Space Operations Commander, and the CFSCC. It also examines some situation dependent ways models air forces can be organized and presented to a JFC, as well as standing joint organizations that do the same. While critically consuming this material, consider this question: how would you describe joint air power? How would you describe joint space power? The required materials: LeMay Center, Volume 3, The Commander Air Force Forces, 2016, pages 1 through 5. LeMay Center, Volume 3, The Joint Air Force, a Joint Force Air Component Commander, 2016, read pages 1 through 3. LeMay Center, Volume 3, Air Force Component Presentation Considerations, read pages 1. And again, most of the time I'm doing these lessons, I am strictly reading the lesson, skipping the reading, um, and going to the progress check. When I do the progress check, I brute force it. I'll take the quiz, and sometimes I get five right of the 10 questions. And then, of course, you have to have at least an 80. I do it again. And then there's some different questions. And so I may score higher or I may score lower. And then the third time, fourth time around, you're seeing a lot of the, um, you've already seen most of the questions. This is a small test bank. Um, and so you can brute force it, or you can actually do the readings and skim them, and then have the knowledge, and then take the uh, the progress check. You probably would score better. You probably would serve yourself better. But if you are like me and under time constraints, you don't have time for that. So just brute force it and work your way to the next thing. Joint Air Power, the Joint Air Operations Center, or JOC. The JOC is the weapon system that, in large part, provides command and control for air power over any area of operation. From major combat to humanitarian efforts, it is the engine room of air operations at the theater level. The JOC is central to the air tasking cycle, which provides the products needed to prosecute an operation, including the centerpiece, the air tasking order. The ATO is the commonly shared document specifying detailed orders for air power forces over a 24-hour period. JP 3-30, Command and Control of Joint Air Operations, notes that ATO disseminates projected sorties, capabilities, and/or forces to targets and specific missions. The ATO for a major operation can be extensive and very detailed. It is central to air power employment. Required videos. This short 60-minute story trailer shows behind the scenes footage of the KAOC in action. The narrator gives a good basic understanding of how it functions and some of its capabilities. While you watch, recall lesson two's treatment of the joint function of protection. What vulnerabilities can you discern related to a JOC? How might those be mitigated? Is a JOC a useful tool for maintaining an agile decision cycle? Why? 60 Minute gets rare look at U.S. Command Center in war against ISIS. 2015 says watch all of the video. And again, it has a different angle of the chaos. The previous picture where it's just showing there's two little small projectors on the side, and then there's three large projectors. I probably should have done time in the kayak. It's probably not too late. Um, and I probably am going to get sent to the kayak at some point. It's just what we do. I've been out of airfield operations for a while, so that would be probably interesting to jump back into it. But I'm not like jumping at it because honestly, whatever. This video continues Lieutenant General Jodas's perspective regarding the roles and functions of the CFAC from the NATO point of view and his experiences as the CFAC during Operation Unified Protector. In part two of the presentation, he addresses specifics of the air campaign and the operation and offers key concluding takeaways. Gaddafi. Oh, that's a Libyan woman um, that's holding up a sign. Gaddafi, and it's something I don't know. This is a YouTube video. Lieutenant General Jodas's CFAC Perspective Part 2, 2013. Watch all of it. Required materials: LeMay Center Annex 3-30, Command and Control, 2014. Read Appendix B. JP 3-30. Okay. 3-30, Joint Air Operations. Read Appendices E, F, and G. Knowledge check. Click Show to see the hidden portion. And it's 12 definitions. So go through them. Comma 4. Who is that? Commander of the Air Force Forces is reserved exclusively to the single Air Force commander of an Air Force Service Component Command assigned or attached to a Joint Force Commander. Combat Plans Division. Oops. The division of the JOAC is responsible for, it's got to be JOC. Typo. The division of the JOC is responsible, or this division of the JOC is responsible for near-term air operations planning within 48 hours prior to ATO execution. The primary daily products this division processes are the ATO and the ACO. Specialty and support functions. Various specialty and support functions provide the JOC with diverse capabilities to help integrate and orchestrate joint air operations. Examples of these functions include force protection, public affairs, PR, staff judge advocate, weather, airspace management, and information management. Integration of specialty and support capabilities is crucial to the success of the JOOC. I had dyslexia or something, and that's not an insult. It's just sometimes it's JOC and then other times it's JOOC and joint air operations. Say 22 minutes. AETF. So if air forces are attached, spelled attached wrong, to a joint force commander, they should be presented as an air expeditionary task force. Air Operations Center develops air component operations strategy and planning documents that integrate air and cyberspace operations to meet Comma 4 objectives and guidance. Develops a Joint Air Operations Plan, JOP, to support the JFC's objective. The JFAC does this. JACE. This is a small team of air power experts that can be used to facilitate coordination between a JFAC and other component commanders or the JFC. Combat Operations Division. So combat plans, combat ops. This division of the JOC is responsible for the execution of the current ATO, usually the 24 hours encompassing the effective period of the ATO. So plans and ops. Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Division, or ISR Division. For operations in theaters outside the continental United States, this division is in the operational area assisting with integrating, planning, and managing airborne ISR operations, developing and maintaining targeting information about the adversary, and assisting with execution of ISR operations. So, for the, and this is just based on my limited understanding, for the ISR, you have a team that starts the launch. I think it's a launching something, LFE or LRE. You have the launch portion, and they launch the the asset, and the asset, it gets in the air and it flies a certain way, and then it transfers to another, I think, another controller or another operator, and then when it's time to land, it transfers downrange, and I believe it's in this ISR division within the JOC. Um, but what I just recently read this today that they are now somehow able to automate landing procedures. And one of the big concerns about automating, and I'm confused because it's my understanding that after it reaches a certain altitude, it goes in autopilot anyway. But apparently, they were able to get over the concerns of sequencing aircraft and having to do breakouts and all of those other things, and they were able to just automate the process. And so now they're saying it could potentially, they demonstrated that it could potentially get rid of the need to have this forward operating um, portion of ISR, and a lot of that need was because, hey, if they're within the AOR, they are also a target. And so putting them farther away from the fight makes sense in terms of adding increasing safety. Strategy division. Part of the JOC, this division concentrates on long range and near term planning of joint air operations to achieve JFC objectives by developing, refining, disseminating, and assessing the JFAS strategy. Air Mobility Division. This division plans, coordinates tasks, and executes the air mobility mission in support of the joint air planning and execution process. And finally, the JFAC. They should have started with the JFAC early, but uh, Joint Force Air Component Commander should be the service component commander with the preponderance of forces to be tasked and the ability to plan, task, and control joint air operations. So, from my understanding, the JFC is higher than the JFAC. So that's interesting. Anyway, next slide. And 27 minutes. All right, we're going to power through this and try to do it in under 3 minutes. You know how I like to talk. Joint Spacepower, U.S. Space Command. Let's see how long. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Nope. To understand the DoD's space related organizations and capabilities, it is first important to distinguish between the U.S. Space Force and the U.S. Space Command. The U.S. Space Force is a military service just as the U.S. Marine Corps or U.S. Air Force are. It is led by a four-star service chief, the Chief of Space Operations. CISO? They don't call him CISO, they can't. The USSF's function is to organize, train, and equip forces, which would be assigned or attached to a combatant command for operations. By contrast, U.S. Spacecom is a geographic combatant command, much like the USCOM or US UCOM or US Southcom. Combatant commands have a warfighting role focused on a defined area or function. U.S. Spacecom's website identifies its area of responsibility as the area surrounding the Earth at altitudes equal to or greater than 100 kilometers above mean average sea level. MSL? Like all combatant commands, U.S. Spacecom has a commander, and in this case, the USSF, CSO, or Commander U.S. Spacecom are the same four-star general in a C2 construct called dual hatting. This image below is helpful in understanding how the two organizations are distinct but related. So it has on the left side President, Secretary of Defense, and there's a chain of command, other combatant commands, U.S. Spacecom, JTF-SD, J-Staff, Combined Force Space Component Command, Combined Space Operations Center, and the tactical units. And then it has in its own um, leg, Space Force Chief of Space Operations, Spock, Staff, 614th Air Operations Center, and then a bunch of space wings. And then you have the Army in its own um, leg, and the Navy and the Marines in their own legs. Like other geographic and functional combatant commands, U.S. Spacecom is joint. It is partly composed of forces assigned or attached from individual military services. It may not be intuitive to think that the Army or the Navy, for instance, have space forces, but they do. There are Army and Navy organizations whose operators and capabilities leverage and closely align with the space domain, and they have specific space related missions and functions. Army Field Manual 3-14 captures this well. Each service has specific responsibilities assigned regarding space operations. Two or more services may have responsibilities within the same capability, but the services focus on different aspects of the capability, complementing each other without duplicating the efforts. Emphasis added. Lesson 2 explored this services organizations to familiarize you with what the various services bring to the Joint Space Enterprise. From Airspace Command to U.S. Space Force, Figure 1 may raise the question in your mind, where is the U.S. Air Force? It did. I was wondering that. Until December 2019, all the light blue boxes in Figure 1 were USAF positions and units in Air Force Space Command. When the USSF was established that month, Air Force Space Command became the USSF. You can still note vestiges of this transition. For instance, the 614th Air Operations Center kept that name. As you study the various USSF units and roles below, note that their mission sets and organizations have not substantially changed. They have simply been lifted from the USAF and redesignated the USSF. The mission areas that were in AFSPC and are now in the USSF are shown below. Space Force missions and operations. The U.S. Space Force must organize, train, and equip forces for three assigned missions: protect the interests of the United States in space, deter aggression in, from, and to space, conduct space operations. And they use various um, functions um, within that construct: space electronic warfare, command and control, space acquisition and access, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, missile warning and missile defense. That looks like, no, that's not Bill. That's in Colorado because there's snow on the ground. Cyber and net ops, satellite communications, space domain awareness. Required materials: United States Space Command, U.S. Space Command fact sheet. Torkelson, defining the line why the Department of Defense should reconsider U.S. Space Command's area of responsibility. U.S. Space Command fact sheet. Combined Space Operations Center, 614th Air Operations Center. The Joint Space Players, Lesson 2, explored the various services, space roles, but note that several DoD organizations with very specific space missions are not within a service. They fall directly under U.S. Spacecom. They are worth summarizing here. Joint Task Force, Space Defense. See relation between U.S. Space Force and U.S. Space Command, image above, is responsible for defending U.S. assets in space, whether a threat comes from Earth or from elsewhere in space. Without robust means for active defense of satellites, at least for now, much of JTFSD's mission, or JITFSUD's mission, I'll call it JITFSUD's, involves identifying and characterizing potential threats and crafting response options to them. JITFSA's central facility is the National Space Defense Center, located at Schriever Air Force Base, Colorado. Of note, the NSDC synergizes operations between U.S. Spacecom and the National Reconnaissance Office. Those two organizations established a unified command structure in 2019. What's combined about CFSCC? In the DoD lexicon, the term combined indicates participation by more than one nation. For example, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, is a combined command that includes forces from both the U.S. and Canada. Canadian officers sit beside their U.S. counterparts in Cheyenne Mountain. Didn't know that. Similarly, the Combined Force Space Component Command of USS Spacecom, or U.S. Spacecom, includes participation by the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, and these nations' personnel man the Combined Space Operations Center, CSPOC, at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. Each of these allied nations has organic space-focused capabilities and organizations in their own right, such as the United Kingdom's Space Operations Center in High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, England. I've never heard of Buckinghamshire, but I don't know of a lot of places in England, to be fair. Three other defense operations centers fall under USS Spacecom, or U.S. Spacecom's Combined Force Space Component Command. The Joint Navigation Warfare Center, located at Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, consolidates expertise on how to gain and maintain positioning, navigation, and timing superiority. PNT is primarily associated with the Global Positioning System, or GPS. So a rough, if incomplete, translation of John Wick's mission would be make sure GPS gets through to our forces worldwide. Deployable nav war expertise advise and equip commanders in overcoming adversary attempts to deny this, and also pursue denying adversaries punt capabilities as required. To grasp the significance of nav war, consider the Army's summary. The Army is dependent on the use of this punt data with a typical brigade combat team depending on more than 28 different systems and the 600 total systems that leverage punt. The Army has more than 250,000 GS dependent systems. That sounds like a limitation. The Joint Overhead Persistent Infrared Center, JOPSI, located at Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, develops strategies for leveraging satellites and detect infrared heat signatures of various phenomena from Earth to space. The Space Based Infrared System, SBIRS, is one such constellation. This type of detection, together with characterizing what is detected battlespace characterization, is very useful for a range of purposes, including missile warning, intelligence collection, situational awareness in space or on terrestrial battlespace, and civil environmental endeavors. The U.S. National Geospatial, the U.S. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency partners with U.S. Spacecom in this organization. Let me try that again. The U.S. National Geospatial International, or see, the U.S. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the Missile Warning Center, located at Cheyenne Mountain, ASCO, okay, has a long history entwined with Cold War, NORAD, and Soviet ICBMs, as does Cheyenne Mountain itself. Today, the MWC consolidates data and reports from a variety of integrated sensors, including both space-based infrared detection satellites and ground-based radars worldwide, and expedites its own reports to the National Command Authorities and NORAD. The missile warning and defense missions applies not only to threat ICBMs, but also to a smaller theater ballistic missile, such as Scuds used by Iraq, maybe even Iran. Um, I thought it was interesting that NORAD also tracks Santa every year. Required materials. Irwin, 5 things to know about U.S. Space Command. Finally, the conclusion, and I've went over my 30-minute mark. I know. Um, I'm sorry. Apologies. Maybe we'll get rid of all of the extra white space and be able to get under 30. We'll see. Conclusion. This lesson focused on the planning and employment of joint air power and joint space power. The air or space component does not plan and employ in a vacuum, but is integrated into a joint team to support higher level objectives. The JFACs and uh, we'll call it the cuff socks, they probably call it the calf socks staff must coordinate at many different levels to ensure an execution order and actual employment meets their component commanders, the JFCs, and strategic intent and objectives. All this coordination and integration will take the form of joint planning. This lesson shows how the national policies and strategies are turned into combatant commanders' guidance and plans, and how these are translated into tactical actions via the air components ATO or the space components Justo. Congratulations on reaching the end of this course. Hopefully, the course introduced you to many new concepts, terms, and ideas that will enable you to be a better joint member of the service as you continue to serve in your career. As you know, as you now prepare to eventually move on to the facilitated course, huh? Ooh, consider what you have read that's scary and observed in this course and explore how some or all of the material enhanced or changed your concept of how air power is integrated in joint operations. That facilitated joint course scares me. That really scares me. But we have reached the end of the video. Thank you for sticking around. It's a 40-minute video just about. I'm going to edit it and we'll see if we can get it shorter. I'll probably edit off this whole conclusion. So I'm going to stop talking now.